Hello, hello. This chapter is memory. It's pretty straightforward. It's relevant. Um, some good science in here. The opening vignette touches my heart because it involves HM, and I'll tell you more about him later. The other thing that touches my heart here is we see the name Milner a few times in this vignette. And there's a quote, Milner, 1970. Every day is alone in itself. Whatever enjoyment I've had, whatever sorrow I've had, right now I'm wondering, have I done or said anything amiss? You see, at this moment, everything looks clear to me, but what happened just before? That's what worries me. It's like waking from a dream. I just don't remember. And that's what it's like to be, was like to be HM. And we will come back to him. He's very important to neuroscience. Oh, and Brenda Milner. That's not the chapter I want. How about here? Yes. So I ran into Brenda Milner when I was in graduate school at the Society for Neuroscience meeting. The Vietnam War was still going on. She was from Canada, and apparently we gave her some trouble crossing the border to give a talk. So her talk, I think, was delayed for a day, and she gave a great talk. And there's some videos on her. She was born in 1918 and has done a lot of important stuff, and has worked closely with someone who won a Nobel Prize. So I was very glad to see her talk. I'm glad we didn't really keep her out of the country. Where's my link? This one. No. All right, this one. Wait, no, this one. So yeah, so this quote is from 1970. I probably saw her somewhere between 71 and 73. And sensory buffer, that's important for this. Some very clever research has been done here. We have a model of memory that involves stages, which is probably pretty realistic. You can sort of feel yourself dealing with your sensory buffer. Some very clever research was done here. This isn't it. Those drawings, were they part of your life where you stare at them and a three-dimensional object comes out of them? Is there such a thing as true photographic memory? The book is not in love with the concept, but some people come very close. Sorry, let me just close this. And you can sort of feel your sensory. Yeah, this is clever. So we show participants an array of letters, and then after the stimulus is gone, we tell them what part of the array to pay attention to, and it's as if the sensory memory lingers on in the sensory buffer, and given the appropriate clue, your ability to retrieve that part of the grid is improved. I think it's working. So there are some relevant data there. Percentage correct across time. So it seems like the visual memory fades. And this is often referred to as iconic memory. And as you probably know, Greek Orthodox religion involves a lot of icons, which are paintings, flat, two-dimensional paintings. So we have iconic memory, we have echoic memory for the auditory system because sounds echo. These are pretty firmly established, and the research is clever. And then we have short-term memory, which is where the sensory store goes if we're paying attention to it. And HM's short-term memory was pretty intact, interestingly enough. And Brenda Milner was involved in some of the research that dealt with that. And if anyone's given you, that we used to have these things called payphones, and someone would say, call somebody, here's their number, and you'd have to remember the number as you went to the payphone. And you would rehearse it. And by rehearsing it, you could hold on to that memory. But if something happened or someone talked to you as you went to the payphone and the rehearsal stopped, often very quickly, you would forget the number. And there's rehearsal. And without rehearsal, short-term memory fades very quickly. With rehearsal, we can hold on to it. And HM could rehearse and hold on to things for a while. Working memory is a common term for what we mean by short-term memory. And phonological loop for auditory, visual, spatial, sketchpad for vision, and episodic buffer for episodic memory, which will become clear later in the chapter. And then if we're lucky, information moves from short-term memory to long-term memory. Long-term memory can last for your lifetime. And a very famous person who did research on this was Hermann Ebbinghaus, who did a lot of research on himself. He studied nonsense syllables. Notice that they are consonant, vowel, consonant, which is the way language tends to be, but they don't make sense. If they made sense, like one of the three-letter words was fab, Ebbinghaus couldn't use it because it had meaning. So he would practice memorizing these things, which seems a little boring, but he discovered important things and became famous. And big discussion of his research here. And there's the fading of memory with time. And you can see it drops down very quickly at first, but then it stabilizes. And how you test for the memory is interesting. And here, it's percentage of time saved in relearning the information. So that's more sensitive than simply asking people what's in the memory. This is an important figure. It's stylized. So you have the sensory buffer, which fades very quickly. Then you have short-term memory, which lasts way longer than sensory, but that fades too. And then you have long-term memory. And notice that seems to get stronger over time. And at the bottom of this page, another classic demonstration that short-term and long-term are separate involves learning lists of words and number. Your memory is, you can differentiate between people with this kind of data set. So you have normal adults, and then you have patients having difficulty with short-term memory. And when you learn strings, and Ebbinghaus definitely knew about this, you have what are referred to as primacy and recency effects. Uh, you remember what you started your word list with, uh, and you certainly remember what you ended with typically. But in the middle, you're not so good. By the way, this is very relevant to how you study. If you study material in sequence, you will start off with pretty good memory, primacy effect, and then most of the material is in the middle, and you forget that. And then at the end, you're studying information that's relatively recent, and you think, oh yeah, I started off knowing this, I ended up knowing this, I know this. You probably don't. And there's the position of the memory item with increasing delays, uh, recency with no primacy, primacy and recency, and primacy but no recency because it's not that recent. So that's classic research. And serial position curve, primacy effect, recency effect. Uh, I pretty much dealt with those. And this is an interesting graphic, but it just summarizes what we've been dealing with. Sensory buffers, short-term memory, and you can lose things from that. And if you're lucky, information in short-term memory consolidates into long-term memory. And then you think you've got it, but as you know on tests, having it in long-term memory and not being able to retrieve it is not very useful. Long-term memory has an amazing capacity, but it also has the capacity for confusing you, which can be very relevant to criminal trials, and people are almost certainly in jail because of degraded memory. So there's what is encoding, what is consolidation, what is retrieval. And there's encoding, and he's talking a little bit about himself, and there's Chinese characters and chunking. So at the beginning of studying course content, it's often a struggle to listen to a lecture and hold on to what's in the lecture. But as you learn more and more about the material, you can chunk it. You turn them into meaningful pieces of information. So with short-term memory, they often talk about 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information. But if you can chunk things, you have 7 plus or minus 2 chunks. So it's, as it says down here, chunking reduces the absolute number of items to be memorized, and in this case from 15 to 6. And 6 is easy, we easily within 7 plus or minus 2, and 15 is crazy too much. And that's important. And organizing memory, and again, this is relevant if you understand the material pretty well. You can learn things more easily because they fall into categories, and things that you can categorize are easier to hold on to. And you have hierarchies, and I always wanted to know more about geology. I wish the University of Scranton had a geology department. One of my friends who's in the business school, she majored in geology at Penn State. Uh, she tells me lots of stuff. I love it. Some short-term memories are consolidated. And there are drugs that can affect this, particularly if they relate to fear. And also there's reconsolidation, which is important for lots of things, um, including fear. And the reconsolidation issue is becoming more important to therapists trying to deal with phobias and PTSD and the like. So what's going on in consolidation? We're still trying to figure it out. Boy, I had some memory, and he really knew the stuff. He died at 58 or something. And then there's another story about people with prodigious memories, and these people do exist. There's no doubt about it, and they are pretty amazing. Metamist, he made a living doing stage demonstrations of his memory ability. And I'm sure there are differences in their brains. We don't quite know what it is. It's not overall size. Savant syndrome, very rare condition in which a mentally disabled person also exhibits exceptional ability in some limited fields, such as memory, mathematics, or music. And there was a famous movie that dealt with this, Rain Man. It had real impact on me, no doubt about it. Dustin Hoffman, Tom Cruise, while 1988, nominated for 8 Oscars. Nicely done. Best Picture, Best Original, something. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. And now I have a million tabs open. Where do I go? How about here? Yes. And so there's a summary and vulnerability of memory, fading, retrieval, forgetting. Lots of research into this. We don't fully understand it. That's for sure. And there's a discussion of students. You can convince yourself that stuff has been learned. It's in long-term memory, but it ain't necessarily so. And you may not have consolidated. One important element of good academic performance is testing yourself. The action of testing and discovering what you don't know really facilitates information. You've all taken exams where you forgot something or you got something wrong in the exam, and now you know it forever. You are obsessed with that question that you should have gotten right, but you didn't. So what is forgetting? And there's a person cramming, which is not good for really learning. There's different kinds of interference. We have proactive interference, where information that happened in the past affects your ability to learn new material, and retroactive interference, where you have learned something, probably not overly well, but then things happen and that new information makes it difficult for you to retrieve the memory that you have. Both of those are important. And there's a graph down there. You learned French before. Now you're trying to learn Spanish. Proactive interference. French interferes with learning Spanish. Retroactive Spanish disrupts some of your ability to use your French. It's very straightforward. It's very important. You have to guard against this if you can. And here's data showing that if you're awake, it harms memory because stuff happens. And if you go to sleep, you hold on to information better. So sleep is good. Cramming is not good. And lots of talking there. And different kinds of tests. These are relevant to what kind of tests you make up. Cued recall, certainly a multiple choice would fall under that heading. Free recall, pretty much open-ended essay type questions, priming, give you a little hint before you start, and that can help you with information. And spreading activation, the idea that memories are linked to one another. I don't know about you, but I can feel it. I can definitely feel there's a memory space in there. And I sometimes, there was this researcher, I could never remember his name, and I found I could remember his name by going into my memory space, thinking about things he had done research on, and then working back to his name, and there we go. So there's a network of information. And if I could remember the name, the word for wolf, I might use things that are related to wolves to help me work my way back to the word. Semantic webs, pretty real. This is also pretty cognitive. And context dependent retrieval. You probably do perform better if you take exams in the environment in which you learn material. But the chair of the department at UCLA, who wants you to learn material, not you, oh, I have to remember something, I have to run to my classroom and sit down, then I'll remember it. He encouraged people to study in various environments as they studied, not to have like a church, a chapel, a shrine to studying, where everything has to be exactly the same, because real life is not like that. So if you mix it up a little bit as you study, you will have more robust information. Memory trace, that's related to the person I couldn't remember the name of. And he tried to find memory traces in rats and didn't find it. Information effect, the legal justice system, eyewitness testimony is, heaven help you if your freedom depends on eyewitness testimony. How they ask the question can have a big effect on what comes out of their mouths later. It can be manipulated. Elizabeth Loftus is a very famous social psychologist who did important research in this field. And flashbulb memories. At the Twin Towers, I was lecturing in AMH. I was in one room when the first plane hit and a different room when the second plane hit. And Mark Breedlove talks about John F. Kennedy, and he was in fourth grade. I was in high school. And certainly that's a flashbulb memory. And Princess Diana, that's another one. They're very real. They're less accurate than we think they are, as is often the case with our memories. And this is very cute research too from 1932. So you have the original image, and then you describe them as different things, and then later you reproduce the sketch, and your strongly believed memory of what you saw is morphed by what word we associate it with. Very profound. Seven Sins of Memory. Take a look at that. That BLMP. There's so many ways to mess up memories. I'll take what I can get, but I know my memory is prone to distortion. And mnemonic devices. There's one for memorizing a bunch of digits for pi. I guess that's useful. Chunking is relevant, and Roy Jabiv from our Sensation of Perception chapter is very useful. If I can come up with a mnemonic device, I almost always try to. It's been demonstrated that this method of loci can really help with recalling information. And the most recent BBC Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock uses has a memory palace, and one of the arch enemies had a memory palace, and they would wander through them to remember things. Tip of the tongue phenomenon. This is what you feel in exams, where you know the answer, but you just can't get it out. And sometimes when the stress of the exam ends and you walk out into the hall, you give yourself a dope smack because, oh, that was it. That was it. And I'm a little unhappy that Freud shows up here, but he had a system for helping with tip of the tongue. And there's a summary and review questions. And by the way, doing these will help you learn the material. Test. Amnesia. And now we're getting back to HM. So retrograde amnesia, the past. And I'm a Dodger fan, and their catcher was knocked out at the plate during a ball game. And they did a little mental status test on him. And he thought he was playing a different team on a different day. They had to take him out of the game. And there's Henry. He's a good-looking guy, and he couldn't put declarative memory into. He couldn't consolidate it, and short term, he just couldn't do long term. There's amnesia, retrograde, HM, anterograde. And there he is toward the end of his life. I get teary. I get teary over this guy. He was important to me during most of my professional career. So there's a nice graphic that tells there's your brain injury, getting your standing at home plate and having someone run into you. And retrograde amnesia, you lose a day or two. It almost always comes right back. And anterograde, brain fog. You're going to have trouble remembering things for a while after you've had your bell rung. And then here's the left hemisphere, which they love, and the hippocampus, Latin seahorse. I've never totally seen that parallel, but I guess I get it. And there's the hippocampus in your temporal lobe, and there's a tail that runs around and moves to the middle of your brain and goes to your mammillary bodies. And HM, uh, what? The HM had his hippocampus largely went away. The person on the left has very large ventricles. There's something up with that brain. One thing that's noteworthy about HM is his cerebellum. The lesion was done bilaterally, which means both sides in the medial temporal lobes, taking out the hippocampus and some adjoining tissue. But boy, his cerebellum took a hit too. My advisor in grad school always thought that the cerebellum was important for memories. And maybe it's true. So now I guess I will show you. I'll show you HM's brain, which is back. Oh, here we go. Too many tabs. Wrong tab. And as the book points out, after HM died, he and his caretakers agreed to donate his brain to science. And they sectioned, cut, sliced, all synonyms, HM's brain live on the internet. And I used to have a little Linux computer, and I went to Northern Light Coffee Bar, and I hooked up to their internet connection. And by the end, I had a small collection of people around me watching them section HM's brain. It was a deal. More than a day worth of sectioning. Teams of support people. In the middle part of it, a piece of equipment broke. They had to go in, rip it out, put a new piece of equipment in, and hope that that one didn't break, because they only had two. There's some good videos on this on the internet. This is a short one, so it won't bore you. But I was there, man. I was watching this live on the internet. So there's HM's brain. That's pretty far forward in the brain. They just started. This white stuff, you can see it's all frozen. This white stuff is gelatin, which supports the brain. And the gelatin is not just around the brain, it has infiltrated the brain. So HM's brain, the liquid inside, is now the same as the outside. So it's all one thing. If you put a grape in Jell-O and started slicing the Jell-O, as soon as you hit the grape, it would fall out, and we can't have that happen with HM. You can sort of see there are cooling lines going into this. This is an aluminum block, and his brain is in very good shape in that picture. And this talks about HM a bit and his epilepsy. And I don't think I'll ever learn his real name because he's always been HM. And here we go. So let me explain things again. There's not a lot of frost here, but this aluminum outer area is the freezing unit. These are the leads that put the refrigerant in. We are now in a more important part of the brain. I think I see the substantia nigra. There are these dark spots, and we're cutting. But just watch how amazing this is. Look at that. Look at that. And that goes out and it's saved. Every section is photographed. I think every section was put on a giant piece of glass. This cost a fortune to do. It was done so beautifully. If that interests you, there are better, less noisy videos of it. What else do I have here? No, that's later. And I have to find my way back, and it's this one. So Henry could do some stuff, and the psych department has this mirror drawing task. I used it in research methods lab when I taught it, and it's challenging because you can't see the drawing or your hand, only in the mirror, and you have to keep your pencil inside the double lines. And man, that's tough. Some of my students started screaming, and the faculty wanted to know what I was doing to them. Oh, there's Brenda Milner, 1965. And he learned. He got better and better and better. But every time you put him in front of it, he had never seen it before. What do I do? Tell me what to do. So he couldn't declare anything about the test, but he developed the necessary visual motor skills. Very interesting. Brenda Milner. Oh my God. So bright. And then we have declarative and non-declarative memory, and they're pretty well named. And there's a nice graphic: declarative memory, explicit facts and events. That's what HM had trouble with. Non-declarative memory, skills and habits, which you could do. Priming, I think you could do class conditioning, habituation, sensitization. So his deficit was pretty much declarative. Korsakoff's, again, that reminds me, I have to get more pills. I'm taking medication for my condition that depletes thiamine, and chronic alcoholics gets a depleted thiamine, and they get a vicious memory deficit, and they make things up to cover for themselves. They confabulate. And I've been out of my pills for a couple of days. I got to go get some. So I don't want thiamine deficiency because that can damage the brain. And mammillary bodies. Oh yeah. And I need my thiamine. I have to get some B complex. And there are your mammillary bodies, right down here. And these are severely damaged. They form little bumps on the bottom of the hypothalamus, and old neuroscientists thought they looked like breasts, so they called them mammillary bodies. They're connected to the hippocampus, and you don't want to lose them. You don't want to lose them. So Korsakoff, pretty impressive. And here's a stranger condition, which I don't know much about, but it deals with autobiographical information. And a famous patient, Casey, what he could and could not do. He had damage to lots of places, including, of course, the hippocampus. Cortex seems to be important to his deficit. Tolving, there's a big name in memory. Casey is not as well understood as HM. I wonder if he's still alive. Maybe he'd like to be sliced. I'd like to be sliced. Boy, it's expensive. The pieces of glass they put those giant sections on, they have to be really, really high quality. It's extremely expensive. Um, popular uh, depictions of amnesia are often mistaken, and the book talks about some examples. And amnesia in real life, and this is interesting reading. And is it real amnesia? Is it malingering? Uh, and more typical cases of amnesia, the person recovers at least bits and pieces of the missing memory over time. And split personality, that's an interesting phenomenon, which the media loves. How well that's represented is debatable. So we've already seen this: long-term memory, declarative, episodic, semantic, non-declarative skill, priming and conditioning. So Engram, famous person, tried to find the memory trace in rats' brains, and he spent years trying to discover where specific memories were encoded in the cerebral cortex. It did not work out well. He did not find a memory and cut it out. So, if you're learning, if you're functioning, your brain is changing. And if your brain is changing, your synapses are probably changing. So this is just an overview of what could be happening. And sometimes, the synapse changes its functionality. Sometimes you get branching and new connections. And drugs that influence that would disrupt memory. This is Hebbian synapses, things that fire together, wire together. And that's one of my favorite neurons, a pyramidal neuron in the cerebral cortex. And there's an example of what could be going on. LTP, long-term potentiation. This was and is hot in neuroscience. And there's a nice graph on this page. So originally it focused on the hippocampus, but we've found it in other parts of the brain too. So after a great deal of stimulation, you can get a rise in synaptic responses after the potentiation, long-term potentiation. And lots of research here on neurophysiology and drugs and stuff. And there's a discussion of that. And boy, these are rhesus macaques. There was a lab in Dunmore where the head of the lab had worked with these guys, and boy, they are aggressive, and they have serious canines. So this is a delayed matching, non-matching to sample task, which is challenging and involves different parts of the brain than delayed matching to sample tasks. So the monkey has to learn if there's an item under the key on the retest, the item will not be under the key; it'll be under the dome. And really interesting research on doing lesions to the hippocampus and adjoining parts of the brain. That's not a human brain; that's a rhesus brain. So there's the hippocampus and the cortex around it, and purpose control. They do well. Hippocampus specifically, they do pretty darn well, but extend it to involve medial temporal areas around it, and bam, things are pretty gone. Squire's a big name. So it's not simply the hippocampus. Why are there things we should forget? And this relates to phobias and PTSD. It's an interesting story, and she was signed up for a study, and it was a double-blind study, so she didn't know what she was getting. But she got propanolol, which I have provided you with a link to, and I've done it again. And that's the wiki entry for propanolol. It's a common drug. It's a beta blocker, and it's used for some conditions, and it blunts the response of the autonomic nervous system, and it can help reduce memories for traumatic events. The only person who ever cited my doctoral dissertation, he was doing research on extinguishing fears using propanolol, and I think he hoped he was going to come up with something he could sell, because he ran around neuroscience with a full film crew one year, but I haven't heard anything about that of late. And oh my God, it's over. It ain't over. But phobias, PTSD can be crippling. And if we could come up with ways to blunt that fear, to more effectively extinguish that fear, that would be a really good thing. So there's hope. And it's a combination of drugs and behavioral therapy. And there's Muse, and there's terms that we've dealt with, virtually all of them. And that's the name of that tune. So that's the end of the memory chapter. Thanks for dropping by. Hope things are going well for you. Everybody's doing pretty well. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that, actually. Whoops. Wrong button. No. I'm sorry you have to watch this. This is the wrong chapter, so I'm going to close this completely. And then I can come over here. There we go. And stop this. Have a good day.